It's always been a privilege to be a member of Kiwanis, and particularly the Downtown Club. Back when I joined in 1973, it was a particular privilege because you weren't invited to join if they had more than 2 people in the same category, and there were only 2 spots available for saving and loan institutions, and I had to wait until Frank Little with First Indiana resigned from the club for me to become a member. I was sponsored by fellow banker Dick Muir, who was a longtime friend of mine, and Lynn Aish actually introduced me to the club on my introduction day, and he was one of my sponsors. Of course, was the president of University of Indianapolis, which is my wife and I's alma mater. Back then, they would come to your office and interview before they would approve you for membership. So Dick and 2 other members of the club came into my office at the bank, and we had an interview, and then they took it back to the membership committee. When I told my mentor at the bank was a fellow by the name of John Perry, who won't mean anything to anybody in the room except Bob Baxter. Bob knew John K. Perry, and I told him I was going to join the Downtown Kiwanis Club, and he said, well, I was a member of that, but they kicked me out. He said, I didn't attend, and I got a letter one day saying I was no longer a member because I hadn't been attending. So attendance was important then, and it still is now. I was told by Dick Muir, my sponsor, to get involved in Kiwanis. The key is to stay involved and become involved when you're a new member. So I immediately became a member of the softball team. I got on the basketball committee, and that was in 1973, and I'm still on the basketball committee 37 years later. And one of the fun committees that I served on at that time and really got to know a lot of Kiwanians was the election committee. Back then we had around 30 or 40 people on each of the 2 election committees, and you really got to know a lot of members of the club. I was also told by my sponsors the way to get involved in Kiwanis is to sit at a different table each Friday. Get to know different people and sit with someone new each week. And I did that for about 6 months and got to meet an awful lot of people. In my stint following my banking career as executive director of Kiwanis International Foundation, I found some information that I thought was very important as we look at Kiwanis and membership, is that of all Kiwanians that leave Kiwanis Club for one reason or another, 80% of all people that leave Kiwanis do it in the first 2 years of their membership. And I think that's probably because they don't get involved in Kiwanis when they first join. If you really get involved in Kiwanis, you get to love Kiwanis and what they do in the community, what they do for the children of the world. And I think staying active that first 2 years is important, because that probably is very important in the retention of Kiwanis Club members. I don't know, most of you have heard of the Ruby K program of Kiwanis. I've always felt like that is a good program because typically when individuals, men and women, join Kiwanis, when they're asked why they didn't join Kiwanis before, they usually say, because no one asked me, no one invited me. So you really need to invite your friends, relatives, and people you know to be Kiwanians. And the Ruby K program is an award system for bringing in new members. And I've brought in, over my 37 years in Kiwanis, 57 new members, and that puts me way still behind Tom Dunham and the late Bob Moorhead in our club, but I have invited a lot of new people to become members, and I think that's what you need to do. But the Ruby K system does that. I've kept 100% membership, and that's another area that I think is important. If you can't get to the club meetings on Friday, do interclubs. I've gotten to meet some really neat people through my interclubbing, and I've gotten to be friends with a lot of my Downtown Club members, people like Ed Doyle and Lowell Williams, and a group that I wouldn't have got to know otherwise had it not been for doing interclubs. Throughout my years of Kiwanis, Kiwanis has a different, kind of a unique way of bringing different life experiences together, and I'm going to recite a couple of those today. I've been a longtime baseball fan and supporter of the Indians. My wife and I have had season tickets for the Indians since 1978. I've been on the Speakers Bureau of the Indianapolis Indians, and of course I've been taking my children and my grandchildren to Indians games for the last 40 years, I guess, and that all came about as a result of sitting out here one day at one of the tables with a fellow Kiwanian. I got to meet Max Schumacher, and that resulted in a long-time relationship. The other is when I was starting at the bank on East Market Street in 1961, one of my jobs is, in addition to being teller, one of my jobs was, if there was a snow the night before, I had to get into the office early because I had to shovel the sidewalks, and that was part of my job description in 1961. Right next door to our bank was People's Bank, and there was an old fellow that would come out and shovel the snow for People's at the same time I was out there. He was a fellow who was retired in his 80s, and he lived in the top of the People's Bank building in the penthouse suite. And his name was F.M. McWhorter. He was one of the founders of People's Bank. But more uniquely he was a founding member of our downtown Kiwanis Club, who joined our club in 1916. And later, 2 other generations of the McWhorter family were members of our club. F.T., his son, was a longtime member of the club, and his grandson, William E. Mack McWhorter, is a past president of the club, as I am. So it's unique how Kiwanis brings our lives together and creates life experiences. But certainly being a Kiwanian has been a joy for me in my life, and the last 37 years have been very important to me. Thank you.